accurate that government communication team members are on strike. That cannot be true. Well, tonight we will turn our attention to the politics in Middle East, if you like, the Arab world. I'm sure most were surprised about the recent happenings in Egypt, to be precise, and that many were those who were very hopeful that with the ousting of the military dictator Hosni Mubarak would come a democratic regime in Egypt. Yet another calamity has befallen the people of Egypt. A democratically elected president has been ousted by the military. Well, they have devolved into what has become known as the guardians of the stability of the states. At least they know themselves to be that. And they have chosen to describe rather what they did in very palatable language as intervention, military rescue intervention, and not necessarily a coup. Well, we will discuss this matter in details, but to help us with the discussion tonight, I have a very powerful guest, experienced in his field, very young, but very, very smart and intelligent. But it is important I say this. He is not a member of the NDC, neither do I know him to be a member of the MPP, nor the CPP or PPP, GCPP, or the PPs, or any political party in Ghana. He is not. The fact that he's on Majority Caucus simply means that Majority Caucus program lineup is not limited to only NDC or government communication team members and all that. We also have the discretion to invite resource persons such as the one in the studio tonight to help us shed light on very important international and national matters. And so we have a very experienced guest in the studio. His name is Ibrad Ibrahim. He is the official translator at the Palestinian Embassy. He's also our expert indeed in Ghana, the experts on Middle East and Islamic politics. So we couldn't have done better. This is the person we needed to discuss this rather important topic. So without wasting much time, we'll go back to the discussion. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much, Ibrad.
Thank you so much.
First time on this show.
Thank you so much for having me, Brother Ali.
Yes, it is important that because normally people get tainted if the clarifications are not made. So it is important that I put on record that you are not a member of the NDC, not a member of government communication team. You are an expert by your own achievement. You are who you are, intelligent as you are. So most people have seen you on other networks. So let's just go straight to it. You are fasting, you are Muslim. Sorry.
Yeah, I am a Muslim.
You fasted today?
Yeah, I did. I did. And thank you so much, my brother, for those kind words. I only see myself as a young man trying to contribute my quota to the development of this country. Okay. And therefore, I've chosen to research in the Middle East, and that is exactly what I'm doing.
Okay. We are most grateful to have you here, Ibrad. Ibrad, quickly to the topic. I'm sure many Ghanaians have seen what has happened in the Arab world, the popular Arab Spring, Egypt. It started with Tunisia, Egypt, Syria, even though the fallout and the intended consequences are not really what people expected to happen. But before we even go that, I want us to help us to understand when we talk about the politics in the Arab world, more or less their political history briefly before we go into the substance.
I think the discussion is going to transcend Egypt, but Egypt will be quite accentuated in the discourse. Okay. You see, to understand what is happening in the contemporary, sometimes it's good to step back a bit in history to know what has happened in the past.
Absolutely.
You see, the environs of the Nile River have been inhabited by people since 7000 BC. And of course, Egypt is older than 7000 BC, or Egypt was in existence way before the year 7000 BC. There is a groundswell body of forensic evidence that people were living in Egypt quite longer than only 9,000 years ago. But the political history of Egypt started in earnest around 3000 BC, when the North and the South, after so many years of internecine wars, decided to form a formidable front. Therefore, they unified to form a monarchical system. And Egypt, just like any other country of the world, is no stranger to political violence. Over the centuries and millennia, contending political forces have wrestled for political clout. And unfortunately, some of the encounters have been quite bloody. And because most of the time they were at daggers drawn with each other. But that's notwithstanding, the Assyrians were able to invade Egypt and they succeeded. They were succeeded by the Persians, who also invaded. And around 332 BC, Alexander the Great with his army also conquered Egypt. But Alexander's conquest of Egypt had a very indelible impression on the conscience and mentality of the Egyptians that up to now, you find vestiges and relics of the Macedonian political system in Egypt. And it was followed by the Romans, who also invaded until Queen Cleopatra committed suicide in 31 BC. In a nutshell, that is the ancient political history of Egypt. But to move into modernity, I would want you to just brush aside all of this convoluted narrative of antiquity, and let's concentrate on what is happening contemporarily. If there is any single political event that has affected Egypt in a way no other event has affected it, then that has been the invasion of the country by the Arab army in 642 AD. So ever since, Arabs have dominated Egypt. Even though geographically, Egypt is situated within the African continent, there is a very strong cultural and political nexus between Egypt and the Middle East. So when you mention Egypt, the Middle East even is nearer in thought than Africa. So therefore, that is what is happening in Egypt. And it came as a disappointment that after the people have made clamors for democracy, a democratic leader was given them, and they've toppled him in such a bloody fashion. It's unfortunate. Yesterday, like this, 51 people were shot dead in the country. It's not an omen of success for the Arab Spring, but we wait to see what happens.
Okay, but clearly that was a refreshing background. But moving into the substantive of what is happening, is it the nature of the Arab world that they do not embrace democracy as we see it in the Western style openness kind of democratic ideals and ideology?
There have been heated discussions as to what genre of democracy will work for the Arab world when the Arab Spring finally settles down. You see, there are three political ideologies that are the overriding forces in the Middle East. First is a self-proclaimed hostility towards Israel. You could call it anti-Semitism. Most of the leaders of the region use Israel as a bargaining chip because everybody knows that historically the Israelis are not supposed to be where they are today. And therefore the Arabs look at them as what? Strangers. So there isn't any single matter upon which the Arabs are as unified as they are on the issue of expunging Israel from the Middle East. And therefore when you look at all the wars that have been fought in the Middle East, Israel has been the crucible of all those wars. It has been the main reason Arabs have gone to war. I'll give you a typical example. In 1948, Israel was still a fledgling nascent state that had been formed by the Western powers, viz. The United Kingdom, France, and the United States. The Arabs came together to fight against Israel. And Egypt championed that onslaught. Then Syria, Iraq, and Jordan. But they were woefully defeated by the Israeli army, of course, with military materiel coming from the West. That was the first war. Then the second war was fought in 1967, the Six-Day War, when in 6 days Israel was able to defeat Egypt, Syria, Jordan, and Palestine. So they took large swathes of Arab land from the Arabs. So that is why today you hear of the Golan Heights, which is originally Syrian, but is under Israeli occupation. You hear of the Sinai Peninsula, which was under the Israelis until recently. Then the Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem, and the West Bank. In diplomatic cables, we normally refer to them as Ad-Dufatul Gharbiyya and Qita'u Gaza. So Arab nationalism has always been the driving force to sack the Israelis from where the Arabs think they do not belong. That is why some of the most formidable leaders that have emerged in the region have been people who have called for the head of Israel, like Gamal Abdel Nasser, who became president of Egypt in 1954 and ruled till 1970. He was the one who led them into that ignoble struggle for those territories that had been captured by Israel in 1967. So it was a disgrace to the Arab world that they would be defeated by a tiny state like the Jewish state of Israel. So they went for a rematch in 1973. We call that the Yom Kippur War. And unfortunately, they were defeated in that as well. And therefore, that is one. The political ideology of fighting against Israel is one thing Arabs rally around. And then secondly, when you look at most of the region, country and leaders in the region, they are dictators who have used the cloak of secularism to rule their people. They will tell you on face value that this country is a secular state. We uphold liberties. We uphold freedom of expression. We give people the right to choose the kind of religion they want to practice. There is freedom of assembly. There is freedom of association and all that. But beneath that, they are dictators by nature. Okay. And most of the time, you find them groom their sons to take over from them. Yes. In the case of Syria, Bashar al-Assad took over from his father, Hafiz al-Assad, who had ruled from 1970 to the year 2000. So Bashar al-Assad took over from him. But Bashar will tell you Syria is a free democratic country. In the case of Gaddafi, after he toppled Ken Idris in 1969, he remained a dictator. But the facade of liberty and secularism gave them the opportunity to be preparing his son, Saif al-Islam, to take over from him. And examples abound in the region about such dictators who hide behind the camouflage of secularism to suppress their people. And when you even look further, Saddam Hussein was preparing his two sons, Hudayr and Qusay, to take over. Hosni Mubarak, in the case of Egypt, was preparing his two sons, Gamal and A'la, to take over from them. So these countries are the fundamental countries that have been ruffled by the Arab Spring. Okay. Tunisia, in the case of Tunisia, there was a dictator there who thought Tunisia should be a secular state. In the case of Egypt, Hosni was a dictator who thought that Egypt should be a secular state. In the case of Libya, Gaddafi was a dictator who preached secularism to his people. And in the case of Syria, we are seeing what is happening there as well. Bashar al-Assad is beating the drums of what? Secularism and democracy, even though in earnest, the country is not a democratic one. So that has been the culture of such dictators. And surprisingly, they are those that have been most affected by the uprisings. Then there is a third element in the Middle East that have so far remained unscathed by the Arab Spring, except Bahrain. They are the monarchies in the region. Okay. The main reason the monarchies have by far survived the onslaught of the Arab Spring is that they tell their people that Islam remains a fundamental and inextricable part of the governance of the country.
Okay, so regardless of who assumes the throne, this will be the guiding principle.
All the rules they promise their people will be made within the ambits of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But in earnest, they try to create dynasties to continue to rule the people. It hurts me to give this example, but Iran and Saudi Arabia are typical examples. In Saudi Arabia, the Saudi family do so well in keeping up the sanctuaries of Islam. We go on Hajj. They are the people who give us hospitality.
But that's just one face.
But that is one face of the country.
Okay.
The youth are disenchanted politically, they are disillusioned, and given the opportunity, they are going to ouster such a regime. So by far, they've remained immune. And when you look at Iran, it's an Ayatollah state, and you have vestiges of that as well. Then in the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, people have so much love for Al Jazeera. They think it's a media platform that is free and fair and all that. They preach democracy. They are ardent supporters of what is happening in the Arab world regarding people's calls for freedom. But only recently, the Qatari emir did not open up the country for democratic change. He instated his son as the ruler of the country. And therefore, there are people who live double standards. That is the third category of the political force we have there. Okay. They will tell you that people need change. They are suffering. They are being suppressed. But underneath all these promises of goodies for their people, they formed dynasties to perpetuate the rulership of certain royal families. But their time will come. Okay. But so far, in the past 3 years of the Arab Spring, which is still ongoing, it is only Bahrain whose monarchy has been rocked a bit by the Arab Spring. And I'm sure when the dust settles on the Syrian uprising, I'm sure the next country we shall see will be Bahrain.
But, Ibrad, let's come back to the formation of political parties based on some specific political ideologies by this, I mean that you often see, in fact, sometimes we get confused, if not overwhelmed. Some groups described as jihadist, some Islamist, and these are the organizations that people rally around to constitute a political party. And when they win elections, they are not recognized. I remember 2006, the Hamas stuff
in Palestine, they won against the Fatah movement.
Yes, the Bush administration refused to recognize them. They described them as terrorist group. And now we have the Muslim Brotherhood. I've been told that is an association of the Al-Noor party. There's another party, Al-Noor party. So this Islamist organization or jihadist groups, if you like, what really is their standing when it comes to political party formation?
Every people have got their own idiosyncrasies. As black Africans, we are defined by our local culture, our local precepts and maxims. And of course, the Enlightenment that was brought us by the Westerners. Yeah. Some people in Asia look up to Buddha, others look up to Zoroaster and everybody. But Arabs are who they are today because of Prophet Muhammad. And when the Prophet came, he didn't bring them only a theology. It was a theology with a tinge of politics. The man was a statesman. And therefore, the message he preached could not have only been limited to theology. He taught them how to build up a state. And therefore, throughout these centuries, since the demise of the Prophet in 632 AD, the Muslim world has always upheld Islam as an inextricable and integral part of national politics. So what the jihadists normally do is everybody and how they think the change should be effected. It's just like UGCC and then CPP. UGCC felt like some more time should be given, but Nkrumah felt that, hey, they needed the independence or change then. And so the Islamists are quite systematic, they are quite steady and gradual in their intentions towards the grand agenda of the Middle East. And they come in different shades and colors. Example, the Muslim Brotherhood that was founded by Hassan al-Banna in 1928. They started as a charity organization. They go about building mosques and then forming endowments for people to help them in the field of education, health, and all that. But underneath that, they have a political agenda to Islamize Egypt and go beyond Egypt to Islamize the whole of the Middle East. These are the people who think that some time should be given people to adjust to the new change, that we should go back to what was happening in the 7th century when all the countries in the Muslim world went according to the teachings of the Quran and the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But the jihadists are people who feel like the Arab race has been slapped in the face. They were a powerful people who were able to conquer most of the world in the 7th and 8th century. Why is it that today they can't defeat a tiny country like Israel? Why should they be doing things at the beck and call of the US and the United Kingdom? So they want to settle their score through the barrel of the gun. So instead of giving them a ballot box, they would rather an ammunition box. So they are those who think that we should use RPGs, we should use Katyusha rockets to dislodge these people. But some think that that particular mechanism or modus operandi is not going to work for us now. We should uphold knowledge, we should seek knowledge, we should be part of the political system so that eventually we shall imbue the people around us with the kind of political change and with the tinge of Islam, as I have stated, that we want them to have. But the jihadists think that we are going to fight, and since the Quran says you should fight jihad, the disbelievers are not supposed to be allowed any space within the Middle East, and therefore we should continue fighting. But I mentioned the three overriding forces in the politics of the Middle East. There is a third subtle force,
perhaps a fourth one,
that is known to most people, and people gloss over it, and that is the issue of sectarianism. I don't know how to translate it into other religions, but other religions have got denominations. Every religion and the doctrine they believe in. We believe in the Quran, but there are divisions based upon interpretation. So much as Christians have got Catholics and Protestants, we have got Sunnis and Shiites. My brother, sectarianism is one tool external forces have used very effectively against the powers in the Middle East. So today, most of the countries are being used as pawns on the chessboard of Western powers' interests in the region. Saudi Arabia is a very powerful Islamic country. If it should put its act together and form an alliance with Iran, which is an equally powerful country in the region, I don't think Israel would pose any existential threat to any country in the region. But we've been poisoned. They say Sunnis are quite different, Shiites are quite different. And the WikiLeaks cables even brought out some damning revelations about what the kings were planning for Iran. The Saudi king said to the Americans, you don't kill a snake by hitting its tail. You go for the head of the snake. And therefore, the most powerful Shiite country in the region is Iran. So instead of going for Syria and all other tiny countries, go for Iran. Because if you torpedo the Ayatollah regime, then Shiite Islam is going to be broken. The back of the Shiite Islam is going to be broken. The Iranians too have got their own, paranoid attitudes and thoughts about what Saudi Arabia may be planning for them. That is why what is happening in Syria today is no longer a Syrian crisis, but it is a regional war being fought by proxy. Hezbollah has entered the war. Hezbollah is a Shiite group. It receives its funding and military material from Iran. And now Saudi Arabia says it's going to support the rebels because the rebels are Sunnis. A Muslim is shedding the blood of another Muslim, much to the detriment of the religion. So what some of us are proposing is everybody can be an individual Sunni or Shiite, but we should not allow other people to use our minor differences, which exist in any way in all other religions, and there are schisms in every system. But we shouldn't allow people to emphasize upon our differences and make us be at the darkest drawn with each other. So that is the fourth element, which is quite poisonous and intoxicating to what is there happening in the country.
And we will continue with the discussion when we come back from this short commercial break. Don't go, stay with me. Hello, and thanks for staying with us. In case you just tune in, you are watching Majority Caucus live on your multi-TV, also live on www.multitvworld.com/stream. I don't need to tell you that you have been enlightened on international politics with specific emphasis on Middle East and Middle East and Islamic politics. It is important that we pay attention to some of this development. It is also crucial as part of building our democratic culture to learn from good practices. What is happening elsewhere, we are not wishing it upon Ghana, but of course we would want to learn what is good and obviously condemn what is not. So welcome back to the show. This is Majority Caucus live. Brad, the effect of this uprising, I mean, the major focus really, and most of the questions people are asking is this ousting of President Morsi going to defeat the building or the idea of building a democratic nation in the Arab world, whether Egypt is failing to be an example of a democratic nation within the Arab world. And people are worried the effect on the economy, because most of their revenues are derived from tourism and foreign investors. And this clearly has a telling effect on their economy. And we are wondering if really this is going to stand the test of time.
Okay, Brother Ali, much as we can blame the Egyptians for being impatient with a democratically elected leader like Morsi, we can't blame them so much. A revolution is not an event. It could be a process. The French Revolution spanned a period of a decade before they were able to fine-tune the kind of political reforms they wanted in the country. So what has happened over the past fortnight could be a sequel to what we saw in February 2011. That saw the ouster of Hosni Mubarak. So let's give them the benefit of the doubt. But that notwithstanding, I don't think any leader in the world has the magic wand to use only a year, a period of 365 days, to outright turn the economy of a country. They were just too impatient. This does not set a good precedence for other Arab nations calling for democracy. But there is another thing that is happening. Morsi is to blame in part, but there are external forces whose hidden hand has caused what we are seeing on the ground today.
The U.S.?
The U.S. is one democratic country that has built a very formidable democracy over a period of 2 centuries. And therefore, the U.S. frowns upon any form of challenge to democracy. So if the Military Supreme Council has been able to call the shots and ouster a democratic leader? What prevents the U.S. from tagging what has happened a coup?
Yeah, I mean, criticisms abound that U.S. you've been silent. I mean, they've been very diplomatic with their comments, and that they are not in favor of any particular party or regime.
Whatever
what
they
say,
say,
the people of Egypt.
They say what the armed forces have done is a form of hearing the voice of the people. All of this is a euphemistic way of telling people
Indeed.
the U.S. is not a country we can depend upon for our democracy. And therefore, the Egyptians should have been patient with them. But he is also to blame.
Why?
You were made president of a people who have got pent-up feelings of frustration and unemployment for decades. And instead of solving their thorny domestic issues, he went about concentrating on foreign policy. For example,
he needed strong allies.
He needed strong allies, that's okay, but he wanted to be a very strong part and player on the political scene. Instead of solving the basic problems of your people, he waded into the Syrian crisis. He asked for the head of Bashar al-Assad. He sent his prime minister, Hisham Kandil, to go to the Palestinian territories to give some very strong rhetoric and venomous speech against the Israelis. Then he had a diplomatic row with the Ethiopians, much to the detriment of basic things like providing employment to the youth, providing enough electricity for your people, and then listening to the reforms for which reason they toppled a president before you. And therefore he was to blame. But I think that his utterances, since he was made president, seemed not to have found favor with the United States. First of all, he was an Islamist leader.
Yes.
He gave so much power to the Islamists in the country. He opened the Rafah border crossing, which is the artery that is used as a conduit to take basic things to the Palestinian people. Because Israel accuses Egypt of funneling weapons to Hamas and the Qassam brigades and other people who are shooting rockets into Israel. He was able to open the Rafah crossing. And therefore the U.S., look, when you tamper with the security of Israel in the region, they will call for your head. Whatever the U.S. will do to see your back, if you pose any existential threat to Israel in the Middle East, that is exactly what they are going to do. So the vibe I get from the U.S. is that they are going to maintain the status quo.
Yes,
obviously. The military council will continue to rule the country for the next 6 months. Today they came out with a timeline as to when they will go back to civilian government. That is, they formed a 10-member committee to look at the draft resolution that was promulgated in December 2012. 6 are judges and 4 are law professors. Those people will have up to a month. So let's wait till next month. Then from there, it will be pushed to a bigger committee of 50 people to also ratify it. Then it will be subjected to a national referendum. So we won't expect a deja vu, something that has already happened in the case of democratic elections in Egypt until some half a year from now. And currently, the people who support Morsi, even though he wasn't a popular president, because being elected by only 13 million people out of a population of between 80 million and 85 million is quite an infinitesimal number.
No, but it's not all the population that is voting.
Exactly. But that's notwithstanding, the man has got supporters. Even if the supporters number only 100, they should be heeded to, their calls should be listened to and all that. And there are those who are thrown in the streets today. But my fear is Islamists and jihadists will capitalize upon the situation and then form a low-key insurgency.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
It takes a lot of logistical preparation to plan an insurgency. You should have a network of funding that is quite effective. You should have a network of recruitment and all that. But people are going to capitalize upon the disenchantment of the supporters of Morsi to form such an insurgency. And then we've started seeing vestiges of that.
Indeed.
So the country has to be very careful. The international community should play an important role to bring back Egypt on the path of the democracy the millions of people who thronged the Tahrir Square sought in 2011. Or else, if Egypt, the most populous Arab world and most important country in the Middle East, burns, then the whole of the Middle East is going to burn.
But let's come back to the reason for his being ousted. The fact is very simple. You have over 21 million people
signing a petition against him.
You get that. So one may argue that you don't really need external faceless forces to orchestrate this. There's a genuine concern on the ground. People are accusing him of making the country an Islamic country, and they have other religions. I have learned about 95% of the Muslims that are Sunni, right?
Yeah, Egypt is
and so this were
predominantly Sunni country.
These were genuine concerns And so one would say perhaps it might be a slap in their face to say that they needed somebody like a U.S. to remind them, hey, you need to remove this guy.
Signatures in themselves are not a barometer for testing the feelings of people about an incumbent government. If they needed signatures to make a leader, why didn't they make him through signatures? The only way you distool a leader in a democratic process is through the ballot box. So if you were disenchanted with his incompetence, you should have even started an impeachment process.
They couldn't wait.
They could have started an impeachment process to impeach President Morsi if they weren't comfortable with his competence. And therefore, to just have, thrown Tahrir Square and then called for his overthrow was quite uncalled for. Democracy is a process. It takes years to fine-tune the ideals of democracy. It is a blunder. It should be condemned in the harshest of words. And the people of Egypt may live to face the rigors of what the decision they have taken.
Tell me about the powers of the military in the Arab world. I'm talking about Egypt, Pakistan, to be specific. They seem to have overwhelming power, and they can call the shot anytime, regardless of the regime.
The strength and the potency of the army in Egypt, first before we go to Pakistan, has a historical antecedent. The British took control of Egypt in 1822. The Egyptians got their independence in 1922, but they didn't have their own king or president till 1952, when Fuad I became the king of Egypt. Then by 1953, they staged a coup that threw monarchy through the window. And then they had Mohammed Najib, who ruled for only 1 year. After Mohammed Najib, President Gamal Nasser, of blessed memory, the pan-Arab leader, came into the picture, and he ruled for 16 years, from 1954 to 1970. All this while, all of this had happened during the Cold War, when America and the Soviet Union were fighting a subtle battle against each other. So the Arab countries had a choice to either pitch camp with the United States or do so with the Soviet Union, which was a communist state. And therefore, Gamal Nasser, as a pan-Arab leader, as a nationalist leader, decided to pitch camp with the Soviet Union. So by 1970, all the weapons they were receiving were from the Soviet Union. That was why he took a decision to invade Israel. By 1967, even though with Western help, the Israelis were able to parry off the attack. Then when he died in 1971, Anwar al-Sadat, his vice, his deputy, who had become the president, pitched further camp with the Soviet Union. And then he entered into a truce, an agreement with them, that they were going to supply them weapons, they were going to give them protection against any Western onslaught. And that continued for 5 years, until 1976. So when Egypt realized that, no, the U.S. had to be brought into the picture for them to have a buoyant economy, they jettisoned their alliance with the Soviet Union and embraced the United States. That was why Hosni Mubarak was a lover to the United States.
Indeed.
So they decided that if they would pitch camp with the U.S., and the U.S. has got the money, it has got the technology, and it has got the expertise. So they decided that, well, since you are jettisoning the Soviet Union, come pitch camp with us. And we are going to supply you military aid every year. That is why the current annual aid the U.S. gives the Egyptian army stands as a whooping 1.3 billion US dollars every year.
And they just issued this year's, a supply of 1.3 amidst this crisis.
Yeah, exactly. So what happened between 76 and 81 was very instrumental. By 1979, the people of Iran had staged the Ayatollah revolution. So they said they didn't want the Shah, who was a secularist with Western backing. So the Westerners felt like they were losing ground. So when Hosni Mubarak came in the picture in 1981, after the assassination of President Anwar al-Sadat, he immediately opened its arms in warm embrace to the United States of America. So since 81, that was why during the first Gulf War, the war against Saddam Hussein, American soldiers were given space to operate and launch attacks from Egypt. So they launched attacks from Egyptian territory as well. So they've always been lovers to the United States. They've enamored themselves to the United States. That is why the army has an unending supply of assistance from the U.S. And if the U.S. was not privy to the ouster of President Morsi, the military would not have had the nerve to have caused this ouster.
Clearly.
A cable, a simple cable from the American embassy in Egypt would have overturned proceedings the way they went. But they decided to stand aloof and look at what was happening. And now they are saying that they are playing the middle ground, they are playing the neutral ground, the voices of the people should be listened to.
Which clearly, from all indication, is a double standard.
It's double standards, and they are not interested in having an Islamist. They felt like it was a threat that an Islamist should rule the country. And it's a huge setback for the Muslim Brotherhood. It will take them time to be resilient enough to pick up the pieces again.
How about the interim Prime Minister, who happens to be the opposition leader, if I'm right, appointed by this the military?
The interim president is Adli Mansour. But he, 2 days ago, he decided to make Mohammed El-Baradei, the former head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the prime minister. But the outcry from the streets was quite overwhelming. So he rescinded that decision. So he has chosen an economist to become the prime minister. But that's notwithstanding. El-Baradei will continue to be his deputy, and he's going to advise him on foreign policy. And you can see all the writings on the wall. Why should El-Baradei advise him on foreign policy? El-Baradei is a Western stooge. It's a puppet of the West.
And clearly this goes against the interests of the
It goes against the interests of the Egyptian people. And Egypt is not like other Gulf countries in the region that have got oil or natural gas. And the economy thrives upon the services sector, tourism and agriculture. So relatively speaking, Egypt is an impoverished country. Before it can put its head above water, it needs financial assistance, which financial assistance the West is ready to provide, but things are to be done according to their own terms.
Indeed. And when we come back, you tell me about the support, if there was any, from the Gulf Arabs, those who were in favor of this so-called revolution ousting a democratically elected government. But before we do that, we'll go for a quick commercial break. When we come back, I still have Ibrad in the studio. Stay with me. Hello, welcome back to the show. This is Majority Caucus with me, Ali Dawood. Still in the studio with Mr. Ibrad Ibrahim, our Middle East expert and official translator at the Palestinian Embassy. Clearly, I'm sure that you've learned so much that you haven't learned before. These things would certainly not be taught in a class, and that is the more reason you should not miss Majority Caucus. We bring you surprising packages every night. You could join in the discussion on 0302-211-70124. Your comments, your contributions should border on the topic discuss. No NDC MPP, please. Let's discuss Middle East politics as we develop our nascent democratic culture. Ibrad, you would have to tell me before you leave this studio whether indeed any of the Arab nations, the Gulf Arabs, were in support of this. I want to call it coup, honestly. I could not see any befitting expression. Were there any Arab support? I could see some of them starting to donate aid to the interim government.
You see, there is a common cliche in Arabic. They say, "Unsur akhaka dhaliman aw mazluma." In whatever circumstance, invariably, help your brother, whether he's the oppressor or the oppressed.
Okay, hold on. I have Yaya. Hello, Yaya. It looks like I've lost Yaya on the line. Yeah, right.
So help your brother, whether he's the oppressor or the oppressed. The Saudis have thrown $5 billion in front of the current interim government.
Indeed.
The United Arab Emirates has offered to give $2 billion.
Hold on, let me pick Michael and I'll come back to you. Hello, Michael.
Yes.
You're on air.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm very impressed about the explanation given by the gentleman. I realize he's very versed in the issues that is happening. I would like to say we want to see more of these programs.
You will get them.
The NDC and the NPP bashing and this thing, we are tired of it. So I congratulate you for today's program.
We appreciate it.
So,
I have
my family.
Oh, okay. I have Liman. Hello, Liman.
It's Salman, Ali. Salman.
Okay, Salman. Sorry.
Your guest is very powerful.
Indeed.
But I want to find out something from you.
Okay.
Mr. Irba, is there any problem Islamizing a particular state?
Okay.
Is there any problem? Before you respond to the question, I want to inquire something from Ali.
Okay.
There is a rumor that NDC communicators are right.
Oh, no. Before the start of Salman, before the start of the show, I made it clear there's no such strike anywhere. There's no such strike. If you monitor the airwaves, Sam George has been on Good Morning Ghana. Honorable Kwame Abuja has been on TV Africa. Halidu has been on Adum this morning. You have Fred Agbenyo has been on Asempa this afternoon. I mean, many of them playing their usual roles. So that clearly cannot be true. Okay. Let me take Ibrahim, then I'll come to Ibra to respond to those questions. Ibrahim, hello.
Hello, Ali.
Yes, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening. Happy Ramadan.
Thank you. Ali, let me please take this opportunity and say hi to one of our comrades here, Mr. Moses Sama. You're quite impressed with whatever that he is doing for us.
Okay.
Ali, and let me also admit that of late, I'm impressed with the way and manner you are picking and choosing your topics. Speed up is very, very nice. And but for my namesake over there, I pray God to increase him in knowledge. All of us. In fact, I'm very, very much happy with the way and manner he is putting out the explanation. We like it, and we pray God to increase him in knowledge.
Okay.
Very well visit me, Iliman.
Thank you very much. I have Mohammed. Hello, Mohammed.
Hello, Ali.
Yeah, Mohammed.
Good evening.
Good evening. Why are all my callers Muslims today?
Actually, at today's speech, I'm so glad to see such a person on your program.
Okay.
And I wish if Ibrahim should have come to Tamale and be doing wazi for us.
I'm sure you consider that very soon.
If not, you can't get him from anywhere.
No, Mohammed, that is the problem. Mohammed, Ibrad is not a member of the NDC. Is not a member of any political party. That thing must be stated with force and vigor. He is not a member of any political party, please. He's just an expert on Middle East politics and Islamic politics. And so an official translator at the Palestinian embassy. I have another caller. Hello.
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 Yeah, your name, Mohammed.
Yeah, my name is Mohammed. I'm calling from Tamale.
Okay, your name.
I would like to congratulate you for bringing it back.
Okay.
I think I've heard him on CTFM before.
Yeah.
And, getting to see him on the screens today makes me a lot of happiness. But I would love to suggest to Ibrahim, to get a bigger platform to educate Muslims in the country on this political struggle in the Middle East. Because many of us, young as we are, we don't even we never knew some of these funny things happening within there. And it will be in the interest of the Muslim world and, for that matter, Muslims in Ghana to get more education. And we will not mind if you will need some support in terms of cash. So that
you must be very rich.
Yeah, no, we are not rich. I think this will be good service to the Muslim world. So, Ibad, keep it up. And I'm happy you are a young man.
Okay, thank you very much. I have another caller. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, your name.
Your name? My name is Sani El Amin.
Yeah, Sani.
Yes, sir.
Your name?
Please, I'm very much impressed about the program that you are doing with Ibrahim. Actually, these are facts that we need as a democratic country. It will help us to know a certain things that it will embrace the nation to move forward. If I have listed the program very well. You see, there are 4 pillars in the Middle East there, which I want Ibrahim to emphasize that for us much. If you look at a pillar like Iran, look at how the Americans have used the nation to tarnish its own people. So these are certain things that we need to emphasize more as a democratic country, as a nation or as a world. We need to know certain things like this. So I'm very much impressed about the program today.
Thank you very much for your comment. I have my final caller, Salisu. Hello, Salisu.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Please, I would like to plead with you to let your guests come back to the show maybe on Thursday or next week Tuesday.
We shall discuss that. We shall discuss that.
That's all that I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much. But it is important that I make this point very clear. Tomorrow you could find Mr. Ibrahim on Minority Caucus because his position is neutral. It depends on the topic that the platform has or wants to discuss that will require the personality to be invited. So please, again, he's not a member of any political party. It is very, very, very important. If you continue to tag neutral persons, expert as they are in their field, they will refuse to come on such platform. So they must be seen as such and recognized by their own independent and individual achievement. Brad, somebody said, is there anything wrong trying to Islamize a country?
Yeah, before I tackle that question head on, I want to dissipate a certain seeming perception from the plethora of people who have called. I'm a Muslim and I'm proud to be a Muslim.
Of course.
But in the same vein, I'm proud to be a Ghanaian.
Important.
As a young person, I feel like Ghana should be given the opportunity to reap some of the investment benefits in the Middle East. It's a region of the world that we know only about when it comes to wars. But there is a lot of investment opportunity in the Middle East. So this is a form of crusade. I think it's a national duty for me as a young man who has learned the language of the region to create awareness about the region so that perhaps governments, incumbent governments and those that come after them will be more interested in the region so that there will be more opportunities for Ghanaians. So I'm a Muslim, I'm a Ghanaian, I'm a patriotic young man who wishes to contribute my quota to national development.
Indeed.
Islam is just one of 1,001 religions in the world. It is the wish of every adherent of any religion that their religion become the most important religion in the world. A Buddhist wishes that the whole of the world were Buddhist.
Indeed.
A Christian wishes that the whole of the world were Christian, much as I wish that Islam would be the most dominant religion in the world. But that notwithstanding, there is beauty in diversity. If God wanted everybody to be a Catholic, we would have all been born in the Vatican. But we aren't born in the Vatican. If you wanted us to all be Muslims, we would have been born in Muslim lands. So Christians, Muslims, and people of all other faiths should be given room to operate and practice their religions. But we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there is goodness in every scripture. You may not believe in the Quran. Someone else may not believe in the Bible. But when you take time and read books that are of heavenly origin, even if people purport them to not be so, at least you will find some wisdom. I read the Bible a lot, I get a lot of wisdom from the Bible. So if Islam is put into the table, a form of political system that can save the world, why not? You see, in Somalia, people have heard of the Union of Islamic Courts. They took over the country a year before 2006. Maritime piracy was a world canker. Ships were not safe when they traveled along the Horn of Africa. But when those people instilled Islam in the country and then imposed Sharia on the country, maritime theft was at an all-time low. So therefore, let's look at the judicial and the legislative aspect, even if we shouldn't look at the doctrinal aspects of scriptures. Let's look at the wisdom we can get from bits and pockets of governance wisdom we can get from the Bible, the Quran, the Talmud of the Jews, and all other scriptures in the world. So a country can be an Islamic country, but people within the country who have other ideas, who want to practice other religions, should not be deterred from doing that.
Okay. So is there any hope, in conclusion, is there any hope for the Arab nations that will get to see what democracy really is?
You see, the Arabs are an interesting breed of people. They are an interesting breed of people. I don't think any political system will work with Arabs if it is devoid of religion.
Okay.
So if it's democracy we want to give them, let's have something like Islamic democracy. Let's have some people have even proposed Shariocracy, a combination of Sharia and democracy. Let's look at the people. Every people are quite unique. Okay. What works for one generation or one race of people does not necessarily have to work for other people. These are people who have been under the rule of Islam for well over 1.5 centuries. 1.5 millennia. And therefore, if you want to push down a new form of a system down their throats, it should be gradual. Let's gradually give them the political shock they need, and then let's see what happens. But what has happened in Egypt has really dampened the spirits of most advocates of democratic change in the Middle East. And therefore, we just wait to see. The region is quite an interesting one. It can throw up surprises all the time. Don't be surprised if the
surprises will be pleasant.
Yeah, if in the next year we look onto Egypt as one of the best democratic countries in the world, because in the Middle East there are just no rules. Anything can happen. Okay. So we wish them the very best, and we wish that there will be change for the people when little blood is spilled, because whatever blood that is spilled is a loss to humanity.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ibrad, for coming. And the next time I have you here, we'll make an attempt to talk about Boko Haram and its effects on the continent of Africa. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being part of the show. We are most grateful to our guest, Mr. Ibrad Ibrahim, who is an expert on Middle East politics and professional, or if you like, an expert also in translation at the Palestinian Embassy. To all the Muslim brothers and sisters watching, happy Ramadan. My Christians also, happy Ramadan, of course. I'll be here on Thursday, inshallah. Bye-bye.